Guten Morgen zusammen und herzlich willkommen zur zweiten Keynote auf der dghd-Tagung 2016. Ich bitte Sie jetzt, die Plätze einzunehmen. Dann kann ich Ihnen noch etwas erzählen zu unserer Keynote-Speakerin. Our second keynote will be held by Kristina Edström. She is an associate professor in engineering education development at the Royal Institute of Teaching in Stockholm. Kristina, hey, auch willkommen to Tyskland. We are very happy to have you here, really. Kristina is an engineer with a focus on computer hardware and industrial engineering. Early in her university career, she saw opportunities for improving teaching and now specializes in teaching innovation and staff development within engineering education. Numerous appointments have taken her all over Europe and beyond. And today you are here. She has helped to plan and implement engineering education frameworks at several universities internationally. Kristina has also contributed to the development of the CDIO framework for curriculum development in engineering used by 130 universities worldwide. CDIO stresses the deeper working understanding of technical fundamentals integrated with personal, professional, and interpersonal skills. She takes special interest in team-based and project-oriented learning. As mentioned, Kristina is an engineer by training. She says about herself that she approaches teaching like an engineer, with a focus on making things work. She has put a lot of pragmatism into her upcoming talk. University teachers are some of the busiest people, she said, and I want teaching to be a pleasure for them and not a burden. This means that we need to make sustainable use of the resources as teachers. Teaching innovation can actually help you to manage your workload and make teaching a pleasure, not just an obligation. The second keynote relates to the first through a shared focus on success factors and strategies. On Wednesday, Per Pasternak had spoke about structural factors, national frameworks for successful teaching development. Today, Kristina Edström talk will take us to the grassroots of implementing innovation on teachers' level. While Kristina's examples are developed within science and technology, the principle or the way of thinking should be applicable throughout the range of all disciplines. Thank you for coming all the way, Kristina, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much. Did I turn it on? Is the mic working? Oh. So, thank you for having me here. I think it's just as you said, I approach development of teaching like an engineer. To be really honest, like a plumber. When like the water is just leaking through the pipes and everything is getting flooded, I am the plumber coming with my toolbox here. You don't need to know more about me, but just to say that I will, you will get the PDF of my slides. So if there is any fine print or something, you can look at it later. Just to say something about that image, I was in Russia designing classrooms for a new university, and I got to make classrooms like that, egg-shaped. I'm going to return to Russia. I'm sure they will be squared by the time they are built. Now, I've been working in a few months, it's actually 20 years, with teaching innovation or improvement of engineering education. And I started to collect examples of cost-neutral interventions. So to make something different
without increasing the cost, using the standard resources, but using them better. The reason I did that originally was because we had a category of professors at my university, the Royal Institute of Technology, who refused to listen to me. In fact, I could enter a room and I saw them sneaking out the back door. And I thought, I have to collect some very persuasive examples to make those grumpy professors listen. Now, the problem is that the grumpy professors do sneak out the back door. I mean, for instance, we can be absolutely certain that 0 persons in this room are grumpy professors, because if you were, you would not be here, simply. So I've almost given up on the grumpy professors. Instead, I realized that the examples that I had collected were very valuable to the dedicated teachers, because some of them had developed their teaching without really considering their own workload. They had added new things on top of the old, and now they were sort of a bit strained. It's also, for me personally, many of my best friends were university professors at my university. And I felt it was almost like an ethical obligation from me. I could never recommend anything that would be bad for my friends. It's actually very different if you're working as an academic developer and you think that you talk about us and them, the teachers, how stupid they are, if only they did that and that. But I've never thought of them as them. I think of it as us. So I try to support my friends, my fellow faculty members. Now, any idiot can improve their course if they spend 100 hours more on it. At least a little bit they can improve it. But first of all, we don't have an extra 100 hours. Nobody has 100 extra hours. And I think also, if you are a pedagogical idiot, doing more of the same will not be a good use of those resources. I'm not sure more of the same. If it didn't work in the first place, why do more of it? I don't get it. So I want to discuss instead how to improve student learning with the same amount of teaching resources. Or in fact, why not work a little bit less? Some of my friends would actually need to work maybe 100 hours fewer per semester or so. So I want to find really effective examples. And when I say effective, I mean that we can maximize the output. Output to me is student learning, the quality of student learning, and or minimize the input. And the bottleneck resource in teaching is really the teacher's time, teacher hours. So what we need is simply pedagogical know-how, very practical pedagogical knowledge or competence. I like to talk about 4 aspects of teacher competence. You will recognize them. The first one is, or rather, maybe if I asked people on the street what is teaching competence, they would say, oh, it's being able to be charismatic in lectures and being popular with your students. When your students rate you, you get high ratings. I don't think that's pedagogical competence. I'm not saying that you should be a zombie who hates to teach and the students hate you. I'm just saying those are not the variables that we want to maximize, the popularity. Let's look at the learning instead. So to be able to set clear objectives, and it should be the right kinds of objectives, helping students reach a high level of understanding so that they have a working understanding. They can express and apply the knowledge. And it should be, of course, relevant for the program they are in and for all the stakeholders, the society and employers. And then I think, after we have defined the bar, so by setting the learning objectives, in practice, we are defining a bar. This is what the students should be able to do as a result of the course. The second skill is to actually protect that bar. Never let a student pass the course if they haven't reached this level of understanding. And I don't know about the German system, but in Sweden we get paid by the number of students who pass the courses. So a lot of teachers would think I am a mad woman to say that we should only pass the students who reach an acceptable level of understanding. Then we wouldn't get any money, they say. So the third skill is then to design learning activities to help students actually reach that level of understanding. And the only way for the students to reach the level of understanding is that they work hard. They should work sufficient time and they should do appropriate learning activities. So we need to teach in a way that helps them do that helps them become the best the best students they can be. You might recognize these three. Learning objectives, assessing so that we can really distinguish between those who got it and those who didn't get it, and learning activities. It's the constructive alignment model, really. And the one that I'm going to discuss most today is how to design learning activities, thinking about what work is appropriate for the students to do to reach the learning outcomes. If we as teachers can help them do the right amount and the right kind of work, we will help them reach precisely those learning objectives that we wanted them to reach. So this could really be sufficient. This is teaching competence 1, 2, and 3. But I have added a fourth one, and this is really what my talk today is about. We have to do this while using teacher time effectively. Teachers need to create a sustainable workload for themselves. That is good for themselves, of course. It's good for their research. We are teachers and researchers. We need to be able to handle both. It's good for the institution. It's good for the taxpayers. Think about it. It's taxpayers' money. We cannot waste it. So I think even if we are a little bit egoistic, thinking, oh, I want to save time in my courses, that's good. You're saving taxpayers' money, you're increasing research output, and still improving student learning. That's fine. So here comes the teaching trick. Do more of that which contributes to learning, but we can't do more of something if we don't take anything away. So actually maybe the second part of the trick is to do less of that which does not contribute. Do you have an idea which one is easier, which one is harder? You can just shout. Second one is harder. Now, that's exactly my opinion. I think it's actually rather easy to do more of stuff. It's easy to put new stuff on top of the old. And to get inspiration to do good things, you only have to go to one pedagogical conference, read one issue of a journal, read one book, or talk to one colleague. You will get wonderful inspiration what you can do. But if you don't take anything away, you won't be able to do those new and wonderful things. And have you ever seen the call for papers asking for how to take things away from your teaching? I don't think there is one single conference or journal dealing with that issue. I think there is not a single paper. I just realized I have to write it myself. So how to take things away? And I will give you some selected examples from my big bag of examples. And now it's really, really important because I am from Sweden, which is a different context, and some of my examples might not work here for different reasons. And therefore, you have to really understand, I am not saying, do like this. I am saying, look at this. Look what they are doing, so that we can have a look at the principles, because the principles can work in your place, even if you have to make up a new actual implementation that will work for your context. So this is the same when you are teaching students. They will understand your examples and they will learn the examples, but they will have problems understanding what was it you wanted to illustrate with that example. So when you ask them in the exam, they will only give you the example back instead of reasoning about the principle or theory. Then you know you have failed. So please don't fail me. Let's look at the principles behind. So I brought many more examples than we have time for, but we can spend, I think, 20 minutes until we run out of time. We can do as many as we want. So just shout. Family day off. Thank you so much. I really wanted to. That's the one I couldn't go home without telling you about. You could almost think that we had talked beforehand. So, spend less time on marking coursework. We know that it's, and especially in engineering education, it's a tradition that students should work, practice problem solving, practice doing things in their courses to apply the theory all along. And we know that they need feedback on it, and some teachers spend a lot of time marking coursework. That's probably more common in Sweden and the United States than it is here, but it's a really good way to drive learning, actually. So Professor K, he has a course where there is a big weekly assignment, and which really drives the course. The thing is, Professor K, lovely person, full of energy, but he hates to mark coursework. He thinks that is not what I want to do in my life. Here's how he does in the course. The first week, it starts with, course introduction. We always have that. And then he introduces some content, the first weekly chunk of content. And he gives them homework. And homework is often this kind of structure. They should read theory and do a straightforward implementation of some method or some way of doing things. And then he gives them instructions how to test their solution, whether it works or not. And number 3 is really interesting. Now they should do something to investigate this creatively. That means show that you can think for yourself. Come up with an example of your own and try this method on it. Do something, play around. And they should write a short report, 2 or 3 papers, 2 or 3 pages, which is just really compact. Now, the deadline for this report is next Monday, but he also has a workshop on Thursdays, where students can come if they want help, if they just feel that it's very convenient to know that you're going to work with this on Thursdays. He goes there to the classroom, and if they need support, he's there. But often he tries to, if I raise my hand and I ask, I'm getting this problem, I don't know how to deal with this, he will say, oh, Marie had the same. She's sitting by the window in a red sweater. Go to her. She has been having the same problem, and I think she has solved it. And then they finish writing the report, and they come on Monday, week 2. And of course, week 2, they don't need a course intro. So the first hour is now a feedback session. So they bring their papers to the feedback session, and Professor K says, "Hi everybody, can you please check that you have written your names on the paper?" Because that's the most difficult part. And then they send them across the classroom, so the fourth report they get in their hand, they get to work on. And they all bought red pens. So now they should read the friend's report and write feedback on it. And after some 20-30 minutes, when they are done, they get their own report back and they can immediately see the feedback. And then there is 40 minutes or so of discussions. So Professor K will ask, what was interesting, what was difficult? Did you see any cool example in the reports? When do we use this and when do we use the method we had last week? Blah, 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 that kind of discussion. Then he collects the reports for grading. And immediately he goes on to introducing the new content for next week. So after that, when he has set the homework for next week, after that, it's 3 o'clock on Monday, and he goes to his office to mark the reports. And I told you already, he hates to do it. So he's come up with a trick to make it super easy marking. Because they already have feedback. He doesn't write any feedback on them. He just gives points. So a fail would be 0 points, pass is 1, brilliant is 2 points. And really, fail is rather unusual because this is it matters to them to look good in front of their peers and everything. So really, to have 2 or 3 pages and see if it's good or brilliant. To be honest, it takes him 1 minute per paper. And he also gives 1 point if they have participated in the feedback loop. If they are absent, they can send in their reports, but then they cannot get the feedback point. So that's a high incentive to participate. So he usually has some 40 or so students in this class. And he came to his office at 3 p.m. and sometimes I've got a text message at 3:48. "Hi Kristina, it's Monday, it's 3:48, I'm done." And then he goes home to cook family dinner. And this is really important. He tells me, my girls, it's only now, a few years right now, that they want to cook dinner with me. And soon they will grow up and fly away. And if I were just sitting in my office correcting homework all the time, I wouldn't be the father that I want to be. So, and his wife is a corporate lawyer. She doesn't come home until 8 p.m. or something. So I think actually he's cheating. This is not a dinner picture, it's breakfast. I can see orange juice. So I think he really makes dinner with his girls. At the end of the course, he does something so cool. He converts those points, the sum of the points, to a grade. In some courses where he wants something to do the whole integrated thing, he also has an oral exam. And we might discuss that later, actually. But this is how little time he spends on those assignments. So 1 minute per paper times 6 or 10, or depending on how long the course is, per student. That's not a lot of time. If we look at it from a theoretical perspective, it's really, what he has done is he has separated the process for formative assessment, assessment for learning, from the process of assessment for marking, assessment for grading, the summative purpose. I think this is actually a really interesting theoretical thing, because the fact that they are separated means that you can do both really cost effectively. The feedback part of it is an intensive, interesting group activity in the classroom, with lots of teacher enthusiasm, student enthusiasm. It's fun. Those discussions they have, they are really fun. Students learn to discuss the subject. Sometimes I feel in courses that I look at, is there anywhere in this course where the student is required to open their mouth and even pronounce any of these concepts? Often there isn't. They get lots of feedback. Many times, if I explain an example like this, people think that, oh, the feedback is what the friend wrote with a red pen on my report. No. The feedback is from the whole exercise. The feedback comes from my writing with a red pen on my friend's report, and by participating in the discussion, because Professor K thinks of this discussion as a way to give the whole group some feedback. So he asks those of you who had problems with this, what was the tricky thing, how can we, etc. But the grading is really minimalistic because he doesn't have to write feedback. It takes very little time. And I would argue, and the students agree, this is sufficiently fair. Nobody thinks that this is not as fair as any other form of assessment. So it's good for learning. It creates really continuous studies. They have to start working from day one and keep working week after week after week in this course. And the formative feedback, we talked about that. They see the variation between their own and the friend's report, etc. And the social motivation is maximized, I would say. And the funny thing here is, it's like a paradox, because the students feel that Professor K, he really cares about our work. Our work is a big part of this course. It matters to them to make really interesting work and good reports. They think the grading is fair and transparent, and they feel the Pac-Man progression, you could say. Oh, you're not old enough to remember Pac-Man, sorry. But the paradox is really that while they think Professor K is the one who really cares about their work, what they don't know is they have never met a teacher who spends less time on it. If a teacher spends, 25 minutes sitting at night writing wonderful feedback, it's not an act of love in the way that Professor K's running of this activity is. So I think this is quite a cool example. All right, next one. 7 minutes, we could almost have conspired on that, because that will take us back to Professor K immediately. Because I said in some courses he has an oral exam. So 7 minutes, that's the oral exam case. Well, you already know Professor K, he hates to mark coursework. What do you think he likes marking exams? No. He hates correcting exams, and moreover, he hates to design the exams in the first place. It's a very tough task to design a good exam. It takes a lot of time and effort. So he says, I want to do oral exams because they are really, really good for learning. He says it's a better test of a real understanding, because they have to think on their feet, they have to show understanding in front of a human being. It's really much more high stakes for them. So it creates an expectation that they will prepare much better. And he says it can be individually tailored. For written exams, I give the same examples, the same tasks to everyone, but here I can target where is their limit of understanding. So at my university, some teachers say, no, I can't make oral exams because I would have to invent so many questions. They think an oral exam is like a written exam, only that it's oral, that you have to have the questions ready. But here is the trick. also, they think you have to come up with many different questions because otherwise the students will whisper in the corridor, he asked about this and that. So they are really scared about having to lead the questions. So Professor K's trick is to reverse the burden of proof. On the first day of the course, he tells them, in this course we have an oral exam. You will have in my room a whiteboard. It's 3 meters long and 120 high, and you will have 4 colors of pens. And when you come to my room, the first 7 minutes are yours. So think of something you can do, something you can present, explain to me, that shows that you fulfill the learning objectives. Up goes the hand. Excuse me, where can we find the learning objectives? Oh, they are in the course syllabus. let's discuss them, he says. And there are interesting learning objectives. How can you treat the trade-off between this and that? Oh, they say, how can I show with an example that I can do this? And they talk about it a lot during the course. Now the trick is, you can see Katrin there, she's doing an oral exam. So she is in her 7 minutes doing something. And Professor K will notice that she is avoiding some things. She is sort of walking around them, pretending not tackling certain things. So he wants to probe exactly that. Where does her understanding end? So he will say after 7 minutes, very good, Katrin, actually you already have the pass grade, but for the higher grade, let me see if you can also do this or that, and he makes it more difficult for her. So the follow-up questions will automatically pop up because he knows what are the intended learning out. I mean, he really knows his bar. What is it that I want them to demonstrate that they understand? So he is looking for that knowledge. He uses, this is a good trick, he uses a very simple scale, 0, 10, or 20 points, which is added to the points from the, reports during the course. Then some teachers think, oh no, I can't do that. It would be so embarrassing if I had to fail somebody. Absolutely not. This might be culturally contingent, but I'm snoozing here. We can continue one snooze. In Sweden, if a student has done the 7 minutes, or maybe you have even kept on asking, so you have used your 20 minutes, if you think this is actually a fail, you can say, well, Katrin, how do you think this went? And Katrin will say, I'm really sorry, I hadn't studied enough. Could I have one of those spare times in 3 weeks? Yes, says Professor K. And please study chapter 4 and 6, because you really need to know that in order to do this kind of, oh, she says, yeah, 4 and 6, thank you. So that is actually not so much a problem. But we were talking about teacher time, right? So my faculty, they are absolutely certain that oral exams take much longer time than written exams. They think written exams are the most cost-effective form of assessment there is, period. So let's do a little bit of calculations. We can agree that it's at least cheaper if you have up to a certain number of students. If you have one student, come on, you can spend a half a day with her instead of creating a written exam. So let's have a look at the math. If I ask around at my university, how long time does it take to design the exam and do the solution sheet? They have to confess, this is embarrassing, but it takes 1 or 2 days. It has to be really, correct. And to correct one exam takes at least 20 minutes. And the oral, let's calculate 30 minutes. He books them 1 per 30 minutes, but he gets a little toilet break, but let's count that also. He will mostly do Facebook and check emails, so it doesn't count as, yeah. So here's the math. Even I remember this simple math. If you look at it, the break even, if you have 10 hours of preparation, is actually 60 students. If you have to use 16 hours to prepare the exam, it's 95. We did not expect this, did we? We thought it was something in the 20s. And now I feel like a TV salesman, you know. You get this wonderful mixer. Because in Sweden we have a rule, a regulation that we need to give the exam twice a year for the students to make up if they failed on the first attempt. So if you have a course, you actually have to create 3 exams every year. And now we realize that oral exams would be more cost-effective even for really large courses, up to over 200. And I talked to a professor in Oslo, which is not in Sweden, but still. And he said, you know, Kristina, we have 400 students in introductory physics. And then I said, yeah, then you maybe can't do this. Yeah. He said, we also have 10 teachers who can do it. So when you use the 7-minute trick, it's easier to get a colleague to do half the class also. This is from Professor K's Facebook page. He says, damn it, this is what it should look like on an oral exam in sailing mechanics. This is engineering, you know. When a top student is showing off at the board, just enjoy the ride. What I want to say with this is quality time with your students. I mean, really spending time in the subject with the student, showing that you really care about their understanding and learning. And they have known all along during the course, I mean, he has also showed it with the reports, he really cares about their learning. It's really intense for the students. But sitting at home during night correcting exams, that's not quality time with the student. It doesn't come across as an act of love, as this does. Per Hansen is the name of the student. He was apparently really, really good. I think I've used most of my time, but I will give you the PDFs of the slides so you can check back on the examples. I just want to wrap up with some comments. I mean, ideally, we should have had 3 hours of examples. But what I wanted to show with these tricks is that they are not only so-called modern or alternative or cool teaching methods. They all actually integrate the development of skills in the students. Skills, abilities, competencies. And I think it's important when you do something like this, don't present it to the students as, I'm the hippest teacher, I'm going to try a trick on you. Don't say that, but say instead, this is an integral part of the course. This is where you learn how to judge and critique another solution. This is where you learn how to present and discuss, etc. And make sure it's in the official learning objectives. And then you can use it when students come and say, why should we correct their reports? We know nothing more than they do. Oh, you say, but you see, it's a learning objective that you should be able to critically analyze and give feedback. This is how we practice doing that. So it is really part of the course. And if you look at the degree requirements for most degrees, these kinds of learning activities are there. I know you're also in Bologna, so you have these kinds of learning objectives. They are from the Dublin descriptors almost. So I also want to emphasize, I don't imply that this is a way, it's not like oil in the machinery. It's not about hitting the students harder without breaking your arm. That's not what I'm after. I'm after a transformation from boring teaching, and I mean boring both for the students and the teachers, to what really are good value-adding processes. Learning and teaching processes that can really add value. And I think Spending quality time with your students, make more meaningful activities, have more fun, help them become more independent, and make sure they learn. And here are some teachers who are actually the origins of these tricks, my colleagues at KTH and one other university. They don't look so anonymous when I look at it like this. Do you recognize me, for instance? Anyway, it's. I think if we talk about transforming from less value-adding to more value-adding ways of teaching, we realize that the less value-adding are also the most boring. Sitting at home correcting exams, very boring actually, or maybe some of you really like it, but my colleagues find other ways more stimulating. So to take things away, it's often the boring things we take away. That's quite nice. I also think if we consider the threat from MOOCs and digital resources, I think the boring routine stuff are the ones that can more easily be replaced by computer digital resources. So if you're afraid of being replaced by MOOCs, make sure that your teaching processes are enough value-adding, then you can't be replaced. And also, like Professor K, should really wrap up here. Like Professor K says, it's only now that my kids are small. It's now that they are growing up. I want to be with them. And it's only now that our parents are alive, or there is mushroom in the forest, or what have you. So I think it would actually improve higher education if university teachers had a little bit more of a life. Give them 100 hours more of sleep. I think that would be a great improvement. Sleep is so good. So I know it's time for questions, but I would like to ask you a question. What is it that makes us keep doing things even though they are not so effective? What reasons could there be to keep doing things that are not effective? Why haven't we changed this already? I would really like you to discuss it with your neighbors. Let's give you 1 minute, actually.
To say something loud. Now they discuss with their neighbor, I think. There are mics.
I think we don't have time for that. Okay, you should really have had like 20 minutes to analyze it much better. But I'll show you what I heard from my own university. I'll read one of the most heartbreaking to you. Well, you know, it's convenient. If I use the traditional methods, there's no need to think, no need to make decisions, no need to explain, defend, persuade, or take any responsibility. I just do it. Isn't that awful? If that's what it's like to be a university teacher, we don't want to think. And some others, the one at the bottom, think about it as a risk to change anything. If I teach in the traditional way and the students fail, it's their fault. But if I do anything out of the ordinary, everything is on my account. Everything will be my fault. And they also talk about what students expect. They are accustomed to the traditional methods. And what colleagues expect. I mean, at my university, if you come to the teacher's coffee room, it's actually okay to say, oh, I'm so tired, I've been correcting exams until 3 a.m. And then I went up again to do the 8 a.m. lecture. Oh, I'm so tired, can I have a cup of coffee in each hand, please? You are such a hero, you know. But when Professor K at 3:48 leaves the office to go and cook with his daughters, and he meets the professor with a heavy briefcase of reports, you know, they can't really discuss this because it seems like you are cheating in some way. I think some of us actually work very hard because we have somewhere a bad conscience. It's, I don't know, even if it's not effective, we do it because it has to look like we are working. I don't know. I also think we tend to teach in ways that make us feel good. Some teachers have actually never thought about teaching from a learning perspective. They have thought of it as, I prefer to do this or that. No, and they have never really thought what would be the result on the student side. Now I know that we are really discussing on two levels here. One is as if you were university teachers yourselves and you could go home and make changes to your course. But I also think of our role as educational developers, educational researchers. And I think there is a message here that I wanted to give, that we need to discuss teaching improvement with teachers, not only from a learning perspective, not only saying this is a moral good and students will learn more. We also have to consider what is the impact on their workload. And start to really discuss on a concrete level, what would that mean for your working situation? And many teachers need help to design on the concrete, even on their concrete practical level. If we give them fluffy theory, it's difficult for them to transfer that to what would that look in my class. So we need to work, I think, with real examples. And we need to have empathy with the teachers, not just suggest things that would add 100 hours more for them, because that's not reasonable. And I also think we need to understand better what is blocking innovation. And that we have to know from the teacher's perspective. Let's have some questions, maybe. I feel I've been swelling over the time frame here.
It was very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just give us a sign so the mic will continue to this lovely purpose. And yeah.
Thanks very much for the nice talk. I was just wondering if I was to suggest Mr. K's wonderful examples here to engineers in our university, which is luckily not my job to do, but I would imagine them to say, yeah, well, he may take less time marking the students' work, but he loses every week an hour of teaching time, because there's this 20 minutes of reading the other students' work, and then 40 minutes of a plenum discussion. So that's actually very considerable time loss with the teaching time. Yeah,
I mean, that is a very common conception with teachers, that they need to cover all the content. What they don't realize is that they are covering the content, but the students aren't getting so much. So to maximize what the students get from it, sometimes, talking all the way through everything is not the best method. also because students need to develop. It's not just that students need to learn the content in itself. There is also the question, what can a person do with that understanding? So they need to learn how to express and apply and work with that content. If they don't, it's not as meaningful. If it's not as meaningful, they will forget more. So the output will be less. But that is a tricky part. And also because we love to lecture. We really love to lecture. We have spent 20 years perfecting our own performance, but we have never considered what happens on the other side. It's, oops.
Hi, thank you for your lectures. It was really wonderful and inspiring. I have a question regarding the fact that how do you handle people who are students who are not present for several times? Because Professor K has valuable corrections time and also feedback with people who are present all the time. But would he have also an alternative normal exam for those who aren't absent or who wouldn't be able to pass because they're 50%?
Yeah, so the students collect points with these reports. So if they are present, they get the feedback point rather easily, and they can get up to 2 more points. They can get 3 points per week on this exercise. If they are not there, they can still send in their report and get maximum 2 points. So if you're not present, you will get a lower score. And they also know they have to stand on the oral exam showing that they have a command of all this. And there is one more thing. It's difficult to explain, but this course is a little bit different from most other courses. And for the first time, it's really a lot of fun. So they get engaged, and even when they have collected enough points that they would have already passed the course, they keep coming, they keep doing it. Because it's motivating, it's fun, they have a feeling we are learning together. So I think this enthusiasm is actually an important thing to consider how we create that atmosphere in the course. But also, he doesn't have to record who was there or not. It's not compulsory. They just don't get the points. So it's a little bit like using the grading system as an incentive to be the best kind of student you can be. And of course, you can just come to the oral exam. If you know this and you can do it really well, at least you can get a medium grade somewhere. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, and I thought it was very inspiring. But what actually moved me the most, and what as a staff developer I would find the biggest challenge, is actually breaking through the atmospheric situation between the colleagues. Yeah, because I think that's just such a the self-esteem coming from I'm overload, I work too hard. I already had 3 burnouts.
Yeah.
I only that sort of thing, and that it's just such a juxtaposed position to hell. My kids are only small ones. The mushrooms in the trees, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And to me, that's actually the biggest challenge,
Yes.
and I would be wondering how that
actually works. I think you're
works.
really onto something there. I think you're absolutely right in your analysis. Because I've had the same problem myself. One of these tricks is what I use in my course for faculty. So my teaching and learning course for faculty. It's compulsory, so we have a huge. And I have a colleague who does it differently. And it takes him 3 weeks. It takes me 1 evening plus 1 hour at the copying machine. We cannot talk about it. He thinks that I am cheating. I think that he is using 3 weeks' time, during which I have to take care of all the business at the department, right? He's doing it because he likes it, not because it leads to better learning. I think mine leads to better learning. But it has been a low intensity conflict for 5 years between us. He has just retired. But still, so I absolutely agree. And that's one of the reasons I really want to give a talk like this in like a department, so that they have all heard the same thing, and to make it allowed to be smart. And it is not cheating, it is because it is improving learning. If it were not improving learning, I would not recommend anything.
Yes.
Over there. Okay, sorry. Let's take them both at the same time. No?
Ladies first. All right, great talk, Kristina. You're a very good storyteller. Excellent. What if the students go out and do the homework together? Then they do the feedback already at homework. How do you occupy them within class?
Sorry, I didn't really hear. What if they don't give good feedback?
No, they go home. They do the homework together. And then they come to class and the feedback is done because they discussed at home already.
Yeah, I see what you mean. If the students are colluding in the tasks, so they collaborate and do it together. You know, it's just like any other that when he does this 1 minute judgment, he would also begin to see patterns if they were too alike. So he has not picked up that warning signal. And I think one of the reasons why there is less risk of that is because those reports are actually treated in the open with all the students. So the other students would see that they are cheating. Normally, when they just send in to the teacher, they don't realize how easy it is for us to spot that. But when it's also going to be, it's really the trick is to expose student learning, and that makes them behave very much better. I think it's called social facilitation in social science language.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's rather a comment. I just want to say thank you, and I think your ideas very well fit with the research on teachers and students' emotions, for instance, so that both teachers' emotions and students' emotions fit together and lead to better student learning outcomes. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the emotional side of my examples, I think the more we have analyzed and discussed and interviewed students and all of that, we realize that the emotional level is such a powerful leverage in these examples. Turning it into quality time, turning it into things that matter to people is a liberating and empowering thing. It really is. And all that grunt work that teachers do, like a heavy briefcase of essays every Friday, that it doesn't come across as an act of love to the students. You have to show it in different ways. Thank you.
So this is yours. Please wait one moment, because I have some presents for you.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was really
I really would have wanted to do all the examples, but
I recognize that already.
yeah.
Really. So I want to thank you so much for this talk and to give you two presents that are very special for the Ruhr-Universität here in Bochum, because one is a bottle plug that I give to you.
Thank you.
It's manufactured by the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering. So
Wonderful.
they produce it by themselves, and it's a learner circumstances, so that they really do it on their own. And the other is we are the first university that creates its own perfume. So I give it to you. It's knowledge. That's the name of it. And I give it to you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.